It's a case that gripped not just Hampton Roads, but the nation. Zwerner sued Newport News School Division and Assistant Principal Ebony Parker for gross negligence.
Jurors agreed Parker willingly ignored multiple warnings that the child brought a gun to school. Emily Harrison is live outside the courthouse after following this case for more than a week. So, Emily, what happened inside as the verdict came down?
Well, you could feel the anxiety in that room as the buzzer went off. I actually saw several people running towards the courtroom in order to make it in time. And once everyone was seated, the judge warned everyone that he would not tolerate any sort of outburst and urged everyone to remain calm as they read that verdict out. And I can assure you, I don't think anybody moved an inch when it happened. But in the moments following it, Dr. Ebony Parker's family all stood up and left within moments, while Abby Zwerner's family went around giving each other hugs. Dr. Parker did not say a single word as she left the courthouse today, and neither did her attorneys. But Zwerner's attorneys are calling this a victory, even though they only got a quarter of the money that they had asked for. This $10 million, they say, sends a message that school security cannot be taken lightly, and to ignore the warnings from teachers and students is a negligent act. Kevin Binyazin says it's a historic case that sets an accountability precedent.
I think we have to acknowledge within our civil justice system that accountability comes from anyone who contributed to the ultimate outcome. And some of these things are foreseeable, and if we can take the appropriate measures to prevent them, then we can save lives, and we can save lives from being harmed.
Well, Abby Zwerner did not talk directly to us. When I asked her lawyer whether or not she was happy with the outcome of this case, he pointed to her and she nodded her head yes, giving him a big hug with tears in her eyes. Live in Newport News, I'm Emily Harrison, 13 News Now.
All right, Emily, thanks. We'll see you back in the 5 o'clock hour. Now, we're joined in studio by legal analyst Ed Booth. Ed, thanks so much for joining us today.
Happy to do it. Thank you for asking me.
Very good. And we have a verdict, of course. I'm wondering, what stood out to you? Kind of what hit you first when you heard this verdict?
Well, one thing that hit me first was the speed. We had about 5 days worth of evidence here, and the jury deliberated, as I understand it, for about 5 hours. So they were able to consider all of the evidence that they were presented, all the arguments of the attorneys and the legal instructions provided by the court, and reach a decision for a fairly long trial really pretty quickly. So, that tells us a couple of things. Certainly foremost among them is that they were able to reach a consensus fairly quickly in that jury room.
And we talk about gross negligence. That was kind of a key word there in the legal proceedings. What is the burden of proving that gross negligence, and how difficult is that?
Well, when you look at the jury instructions that the jury was given to consider, that's the roadmap. They get them at the end, they listen to the evidence, and then they're told the rules of the road. But those instructions tell the jury, if you find that the defendant was liable for gross negligence, committed gross negligence, then you find in favor of the plaintiff. Now, there were a couple of other things in those instructions, one having to do with contributory negligence. But addressing the gross negligence, you look at that, and it's a higher degree than regular negligence. It's negligence that is shocking to the conscience of fair-minded people.
And then I think a lot of people they see ruled in favor of Abby Zwerner in this case, but $10 million rather than the $40 million that was originally in the suit. How do you view the discrepancy?
Well, I think $10 million is a lot of money. Yeah. I took a look just out of curiosity at verdicts from last year in wrongful death cases, and in 2024 there were a number of them, and they were all less than $10 million. So I think this is a substantial sum of money, and hopefully the plaintiff and her team are proud of the result.
13 News Now has been covering this case since the start. And joining us now for a deeper dive into the trial and the verdict is 13 News Now legal analyst Ed Booth. Ed, as always, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so the school is a defendant. A school administrator is a defendant. What does that mean as we look at this case? What legal responsibility does the school district have when it comes to safety?
Well, that was exactly the question that the jurors were asked to resolve. In other words, was the defendant grossly negligent, and did that negligence lead to the shooting? And the jury, of course, answered that question in the affirmative. Yes, the defendant was grossly negligent. So the duties were the ones that were presented to the jury to decide. In other words, was there a duty to prevent this shooting? And the jurors said there was.
And, we tossed around this word unprecedented, and the jury, in a matter of hours, it seems like, came to their decision. You know, as we look at what this means for future incidents, unfortunately, do you think that this is a case that will be cited and will be a precedent?
Well, I think given the fact that it's getting national coverage right now as we sit here and speak means that absolutely people are going to be considering this in any kind of similar case. So is it unprecedented? Certainly it is.
All right, let's talk a bit about the number. So she had asked for $40 million. She got $10 million, still a sizable amount. How does that play into, how does that play into what's expected or what we can expect to get from a case like this?
Well, the rule in Virginia is that you always have to sue for more than a jury could realistically give you, unlike in some courts, like federal court, where it's a number above a certain amount. So start with that as the basic threshold. But then when you consider $10 million and you look, for instance, at verdicts in wrongful death cases in Virginia last year, none of them were above $10 million.
Yeah.
It's a huge sum of
Wow.
money.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Booth. We appreciate it. "13 News Now at 5:30 begins with breaking news. I'm Dana Smith.
And I'm Connor Reel. We're continuing our coverage of a story we've followed from the start. A Newport News jury has awarded Abby Zwerner $10 million in her $40 million civil lawsuit against the Newport News School Division. The former teacher sued the school division and former assistant principal Ebony Parker after a 6-year-old student shot her at Richneck Elementary School in 2023. In the 2-week-long trial, prosecutors brought forth evidence and several witnesses. Zwerner's legal team says this is a victory for all.
School safety, teacher safety, children's safety is the most important thing. This verdict reminds people that you will be held accountable if you don't make that your first concern.
Now, the next steps are post-trial motions, and there is no official date for that at this moment.
All right, and joining us again for a deeper dive into the trial and the verdict is 13 News Now legal analyst Ed Booth. Ed, thank you. You've been great all afternoon. Let's dive right in. So in this civil trial, we had the defendants listed as a school administrator, as well as a school system. We also have a criminal trial coming up for Ebony Parker, who is that school administrator. How do you think the civil trial could impact the criminal trial, if at all?
Well, the trials themselves are separate, but the implication of the criminal trial has to do with, essentially the money behind this.
Right.
Some of these pooled risk, you can essentially think insurance companies for school systems have provisions written into the policy that they don't provide coverage if you're convicted of a crime for the underlying act. And then if they don't provide coverage, then of course the question becomes, where is that source of coverage going to come from?
Interesting. So I guess it's a matter of let's wait and see what happens. But
right, and it's not certain that they'll do that, but that's built in there and it's always lingering in the background whenever you have, the combination of a school employee charged with a crime and a civil lawsuit that's related to those facts.
And usually they'd be opposite, right? We'd have a criminal first, then a civil, or?
That's typically how it goes, given the speed of criminal trials versus civil in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but in this case, that wasn't so.
Right. All right. Let's talk more about this case because it's interesting that the jury in 5 hours came to a conclusion. Let's talk a bit about the jury instructions, what they were exactly told to consider, and what does it say that they came up with that relatively quickly? This didn't drag on for days and days.
Not at all. They had 5 days of evidence, as I understand it, and they took basically an hour per day.
Yeah.
That's very quick. So it tells us that they were able to come into the jury room and reach a consensus on these facts very quickly. So that means that they were convinced of the things that needed to be proven to the satisfaction of the jury. And to your question, the finding instruction was the defendant guilty of gross negligence?
Yeah.
There were some other things on there, but that's the principal question. Was the defendant responsible for such acts that go beyond simple negligence and show, even a lack of slight care,
right,
shocking to the conscience? So obviously the jurors found that these acts did shock their conscience and resulted in gross negligence.
Absolutely. We say the word a lot, unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, it took just 5 hours for a jury to find Newport News School Division and Dr. Ebony Parker as liable for gross negligence, awarding Abby Zwerner $10 million for her pain and suffering. Thanks for joining us for 13 News Now at 6. I'm Connor Reel.
And I'm Dana Smith. This verdict comes nearly 3 years after a 6-year-old boy brought a gun to school and shot Zwerner in the classroom. Emily Harrison has the latest.
You could feel the anxiety in that courtroom as the buzzer went off and jurors announced they had reached a verdict. Dr. Ebony Parker sat there stone-faced as jurors found her liable of gross negligence, ordering her and the Newport News School Division to pay $10 million. Dr. Parker's family quickly walked out of the courtroom as Abby Zwerner's family raced forward to embrace her. Ultimately, jurors agreed that Dr. Parker acted, quote, indifferently when multiple teachers and students warned her that a 6-year-old boy had brought a gun to school. Zwerner's attorneys are calling this a victory, even though they only got a quarter of the money they had asked for. This $10 million, they say, sends a message that school security cannot be taken lightly, and to ignore the warnings from teachers and students is a negligent act.
I think we have to acknowledge within our civil justice system that accountability comes from anyone who contributed to the ultimate outcome. And some of these things are foreseeable, and if we can take the appropriate measures to prevent them, then we can save lives, and we can save lives from being harmed.
Now that the jury has awarded $10 million, there is a question for how Dr. Parker and the school division will pay it. Zwerner's attorney told me there is currently an insurance policy in place with the school division, and Dr. Parker is listed as a name under it, but it's unclear right now how this will all play out in the future. In Newport News, I'm Emily Harrison, 13 News Now.
All right, now here to help us break down this case and today's verdict is 13 News Now legal analyst Ed Booth. Ed, we really appreciate you being here to help us out. We've been talking all day. I want to go back to something you said in one of our earlier shows. So the civil suit was for $40 million. The awarded amount is $10 million. I guess maybe some people may see that as a shortfall in some way, but you say in Virginia, not the case.
No, in Virginia, you're actually required to sue for a sum certain. And if the jury comes back with an amount less than that, then you only get what you sue, or an amount more than that, you only get what you sued for. So you sue for $100,000, the jury comes back with $150,000, well, you get $100,000, and your client might look over at you and say, where's the extra $50,000 coming from?
So go above and beyond with what you're asking.
You really have to. It's different than in federal court in some other states where it's at above a certain amount according to prove it trial.
And then that 5 hours that we noted in our intro, just 5 hours for the jury to deliberate, what does that tell you?
Well, 5 hours for 5 full days of evidence tells me that the jury was able to get into the jury room, elect a foreperson, and then very quickly come to a consensus about the issues that they were asked to decide according to the jury instructions that the judge gave them. So they were able to do a lot in a hurry.
Yeah, and then, you know, we know there's a criminal trial still to come for Dr. Ebony Parker. But when it comes to this civil trial, what other steps are there still to be taken?
Well, in Virginia, we now have an automatic right of appeal to the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and then there's the Virginia Supreme Court. For a case like this, that wasn't always true, but now either side could appeal. In this case, the losing side can appeal, and that will be heard automatically by the Court of Appeals, and then they can petition, if unhappy, to the Supreme Court. So they're steps ahead in the appellate process.
Okay, great. We'll bring you coverage the entire time. Ed, thank you for joining us.